just tell me who you are and what you do?
So I'm Cindy Sheedy Walker. I'm from a company called Extraordinary, and have been in the travel industry since about 1997. So really, really great supporter of all things South African and tourism projects, etc., all over the country.
And then, of course, you're also part of our SAS Travel Ready collective. So it's great that you're also participating in this campaign. So tell us a bit about who it is you nominated and why you think they qualify to be a superlifter.
So there's so many worthy people that have done so much to uplift in our industry. But recently ran into James at a function, well, recently before COVID, and we actually sat down, and I was just absolutely mesmerized by his stories and his history. And I've known James probably also since the 90s when he was involved in a Shangaan village development out here in Hazyview. That's probably where we met. But now, a million years later, the James Delaney that's become this international artist extraordinaire and has done so much for the community and for developing downtown Johannesburg into a really world-class destination that it is now for artists, for people to do walking tours, etc. I just thought he'd really be a wonderful person to chat to for SAS Travel Ready. So hence the fact that I suggested we ask him whether he'd be prepared to be interviewed.
Great. So if you could just start off by telling me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm James Delaney, and I'm an artist. I work at Victoria Yards in Joburg, and I'm very connected to the travel and tourism industry because I lead tours, walking tours in Joburg, particularly those with an art focus and a downtown history kind of focus. And the last couple of years, I've been fixing up a big park here called the Wilds, and that's become pretty popular with Joburg people. And increasingly, tourists have wanted to walk around the Wilds with me. So in those days when we had tourists, I was starting to do that. Share our story. It's been really cool.
So James, how did that whole project come about? Where did you get the idea from? How did you manage to fight through what I imagine was probably quite a lot of probably some bureaucracy to get things going? How did that happen?
I just slowly started. I didn't have any great big plan. I live next to the park. It was like considered a no-go zone. And I got a dog. The dog needed walking. So I thought, well, how bad can it be? So I kind of ventured in slowly at first. And then I just started fixing things up, but trimming trees and moving plants around and just like little stuff at the beginning. And it was 7 years ago. And over time, it just kind of grew, and I got volunteers involved, and I raised money to do bigger projects. And I started installing my sculptures about 3 years ago. There's about 100 sculptures now. So it's become kind of an art park as well. And recently, it's really taken off because during this whole COVID time, people have become much more aware of nature, and locals haven't been able to travel, and most of the parks have been closed, but the Wilds has remained open most of the time because it's termed a nature reserve, and nature reserves were open. So the Wilds was open. So it's busier than it's ever been, which is great to see.
That's fantastic. And in terms of, I mean, getting this idea from a park, it sounds like it came about just as a kind of natural, organic process where it was something that was on your doorstep, but it still takes a special kind of person to start that process. What is it about you that, or what inspires you to kind of keep going on these kind of projects as the years go by?
There was a saying that a friend of mine said to me a few years ago: whatever happens, there is always a way. And that's kind of become my motto. That when I hit a wall, I think, okay, well, there'll be a way around this. And I've hit lots of walls with the bureaucrats with the park. and I've hit walls with funding and with all kinds of challenges. And I just think, well, okay, let me try to find a way around it.
It's fantastic.
So
yeah.
that works as well in tourism now, because
Yeah.
the studio, I used to rely a lot on visitors to come and buy things. And I was
Right.
making some tea this morning, and I saw a little collection of crockery in the corner, which I'd bought because we sometimes host lunches for tourists when they come through. And there was a spider that had made a whole world around the crockery.
Okay.
Things aren't moving very quickly.
Right,
So
that's a real indication of the cobwebs.
Yes. So I've got to think differently and find a way. So what I've been doing now is reaching out to many of the people who have visited my studio before, living in America or in Europe, and selling them sculptures and doing commissions of the big outdoor sculptures for them. So they've got a reminder of Africa in their backyard, and it keeps my studio going, and hopefully it brings them back quite quickly.
Fantastic. And just thinking back also in terms of the project at the Wilds, I imagine it must be the most bizarre thing for you when you first sort of ventured out there 7 years ago and started, trimming a tree here and doing a little bit there, versus it now becoming this place where on a sunny day, I mean, can be a queue around the block in order to get in there. I mean, what is it like to see the progress of that project over the years?
It's really heartwarming. I love seeing people experience the great pleasure that I've got from the park. So when I see them walking along and the kids discovering an owl sculpture in the tree, or the grown-ups looking at a plant which they didn't recognize because that's been newly placed there, it gives me a great sense of optimism that we can fix stuff. And all those little changes over 7 years have now built up and up and up. And people will tend to walk around the park now and go, yeah, it looks really lovely. It must have looked like this all the time, because it's all just nature. It's just settled in. It's indigenous plants, it's stonework, it's all things that have always been there.
Yeah.
It's just putting them around and caring for them a bit better, so that now it looks really beautiful.
That's fantastic. So
Still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
I
think that's probably the plight of the person who's we've been calling them super lifters, the people that kind of just seem to have this bottomless cup to raise things and improve things and help other people, is that they always seem to be aware of the next what else there is to do. And that's actually what my next question was going to be. I mean, you mentioned the fact that you've started reaching out to some of your international clients to get commissions for sculptures, but are there any other projects that maybe you haven't started working on that you kind of have the bookmarks in your brain for the future that you would love to get around to one day?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I'm building stone benches around the park because we have quite a lot of walking groups now. So volunteers lead them for Joburg people. We've got ones for seniors and ones for kids, and just like all through the week now, advertised on the Facebook page. And I figure this, when tourism returns, this will be a thing that walking groups, people just got off a flight in the morning from halfway across the world, they want to be in nature and just do something relaxed. This is a perfect place to take them. So we need places where you can seat 10 people, 20 people comfortably, like in a circle, and they can have a chat and the guide can lead a conversation. So what I want to do is start building more places where we can facilitate those conversations around the park. And stone is a lovely way to build that, because it's very much part of the history of the wilds and those stone rocky ridges. And so I've got a whole plan in my head of how we can build these so that walking groups can stop along the way. It's quite hilly, so you get out of breath.
Yeah.
You can stop and then catch your breath and then look at the nature around and have a chat and then move on to the next place.
Fantastic.
And I'm also commissioning mosaic artists to do little mosaic details around the park, which helps to navigate. You're on the chameleon path because there are chameleon mosaics.
Yes.
And like a centerpiece, we did one at Jock's View, because I learned that Jock of the Bushveld was written by Percy Fitzpatrick when he lived next to the wilds. Oh, wow. And he would walk through the wilds every day with his dog. So we made a place with a mosaic commemorating Jock.
Oh, lovely.
Which adds a nice reference to history, which is great for walking tours.
Yeah. And have there been, I imagine that there's probably a bunch of other sites like the Wilds scattered around, not just Johannesburg, but probably the country, that maybe were once fantastic, but have maybe fallen into a state where people don't feel safe there, or maybe a bit of disrepair. Have you heard of anybody else doing similar things to what you've done at the Wilds elsewhere that you think has been quite inspiring?
There's lots of them happening, because people contact me the whole time saying, how do I go about it? I live in Swellendam or Pretoria or Durban or whatever, and I need some pointers and some help.
Yes.
And there are lots, particularly public parks, which are being quite neglected.
Right.
And it's great seeing people taking the initiative and fixing them up. And I think that if we don't kind of shift our mindset, then it's not going to happen. And I learned a lot from Central Park in New York, and people here will tend to say, oh, but if you live in America, it will be done for you. But that isn't the case, because Central Park in the 1980s, the water features were empty and full of supermarket shopping trolleys, and there was crime everywhere, and people just didn't go to the park, even people living right next to it, which was similar to my story of living next to the Wilds and not going into it, and my neighbors not either. And it was the citizens of the city who took it on and started fixing it up. And now Central Park is this fabulous place for the whole city and the world to visit.
Yeah, I love that.
So you can. It takes a bit of initiative. And what I've found is that the joy it gives me is just incomprehensible. It's just such a wonderful thing to walk with nature, to work with nature, and to fix things up. Just feels good. It doesn't work. It isn't like slaving away in front of a computer. It's like a joy to go at the end of the day and go and fix some stuff. So I recommend it to everybody. It's good for your mental health as well, kind of to be outdoors and making a positive contribution to the world. It makes us feel a sense of worth.
Absolutely.